The following is a presentation of 13ABC Action News. Now, your table is ready. Join 13ABC's Jeff Smith with the decision makers of Northwest Ohio and Southeast Michigan. This is the Roundtable.
And a good Sunday afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us here on 13ABC Action News for the Roundtable program on this Sunday. I'm going to warn you ahead of time, not an easy topic to talk about today, but one that is very vital to get out, whether it be our family members, our Northwest Ohio, born and raised folks here around the area, me included. I'll tell you what, this is one of those things that's really hard to stomach when you've been around this area for a long time. The fact that Toledo, Northwest Ohio, one of the top cities in the nation when it comes to human slavery. We're talking human trafficking. The stories have been there throughout the years of how these young people are sold into slavery, and Toledo is one of the hot spots, unfortunately, for this. State Representative Teresa Fetter is here with us today. So glad to have her with us to talk about some of the legislation that has been put out there, the Safe Harbor Act. We will get into that conversation in just a moment. But you have really been a stalwart to try to make this topic known, not only here in Toledo, not only here in the state, but also around the country. I was telling Sister Geraldine, who we will talk to in just a moment, Sister Geraldine Nowak from the Sisters of St. Francis here locally, and also the STOP organization. Thank you for being here. But other states around the country have started, and I don't know if it's proactive or reactive, they're enacting legislation too. Why is this so important to you?
Well, 7 years ago when the Blade, did the series on the sex slave trade in Toledo, and the FBI had the bust 7 years ago in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, we had 77 victims from Toledo. 35 were under 18, one as young as 10 years old, and that broke my heart and I think the community's heart.
And if people forget that story, we did numerous detailed stories about it. A lot of it happened at truck stops where the sales were actually taking place.
Yes, motels. It happens everywhere. When you really put the glasses on, you begin to see, what it looks like and what you can do. But it's basically been a crusade for me. And my background is early childhood. My favorite age on the planet is 4 years old. So I look at them as my babies. I was a senator at the time, and I took it very personal. And I thought, well, there's got to be something we can do at the state level, creating laws. And when I looked at the laws in the state of Ohio, there wasn't one word in our Ohio Revised Code against slavery. And that just shocked me, just really shocked me. And across the nation, that's true. And so I thought, well, what do we need to do? And I started networking with the national Polaris Project and Shared Hope, other organizations that were working with the federal government on the trafficking legislation that they put in 2000 and said, boy, we really have some gaps here. This is happening, and the people who are really the criminals in this operation are walking away from the halls of justice. And the victims were being jailed, even our children. So there was a huge mindset that needed to be changed, and it's taken 7 years in Ohio to really get on top of this, and I'm very glad that we're here today. And I do believe we have one of the strongest responses in the United States to fight trafficking in our state, and basically zero tolerance. So anyone who wants to come in the state of Ohio or who lives in the state of Ohio who would dare sell children or other people in labor trafficking, they're going to pay a very heavy price. And
the job behind this is to let them know that that's going to happen. Sister, as you, as an organization, the Sisters of St. Francis, and as the diocese takes this issue under its wing, I guess, where do we stand as I guess, a community in targeting this type of issue? You guys had a forum back in the winter, and you had people from all over the region, even folks from Detroit, come down to take part in this, and to not only, I guess, be part of the conversation, but also to learn something and take away something so that they can start to implement these programs in their own backyard.
Right. I guess I'd like to speak to the organization that I represent, and that would be STOP. It stands for Stop Trafficking of Persons. And the organization is a collaborative effort among all the sisters in the diocese. The Sisters of St. Francis from Tiffin, Ohio, the Ursuline Sisters from Toledo, Ohio, the Notre Dame Sisters from Toledo, and of course my community, the Sisters of St. Francis in Sylvania. And then we have great prayer support from the Visitation Sisters, the cloistered order whose main ministry is to do prayer. So this organization, we found out about this when the leadership of all of our communities, we found out about human trafficking when the leadership of all of our communities attended a national leadership meeting, and one of the keynote speakers spoke on human trafficking, and she mentioned Toledo, Ohio. And of course, you can imagine how these people...
Ears perked up.
Yeah, ears perked up. So anyway, brought that back. We studied the issue for a couple years and then formed ourselves as a group. Our main goal is education and advocacy. And while Toledo, yes, is up there in kind of the negative aspect, I think it's up there also in the positive aspect with State Rep Fetter, and then all the other, we do a lot of collaboration. Dr. Cecilia Williamson, certainly has been at this since 1993 and has been getting things going. She got the Lucas County Coalition going, so there's that, and then Second Chance. And then we network, as sisters, we network with other sister groups. Some of our early on education came from Cleveland and the Humility of Mary Sisters, and so then we do just a lot of networking with, many communities that do this.
This is one of those, and I want to say real quickly, I mean, this is one of those questions that we would leave at the end of the show. What do our viewers do now about this? How do they get involved? Because I think we sit in a bubble so many times, and our own lives are going on. We're busy with work, we're busy with school, we're busy with kids. And we don't know until these types of issues are brought to the forefront that this is happening. This is real. This isn't some movie script. It's actually going on. It may be, unfortunately, going on as we're doing this show.
It is, actually. And I just want to make a comment about the sisters. I created a statewide distribution list of anyone contacting me in my office. And I would put out requests for people to talk to their legislators or what was going on in their district. And whenever we were close to legislation being formulated and passed, I really kind of ignited the nun prayer chain. And I really believe that's helped. I mean, there were certain moments where it needed to happen, and I really believe it's the collaboration and people who are, also carrying that flame in the crusade, to save our communities, basically, and our children. But there are a lot of things that can be done. The old paradigm of prostitution as the oldest profession in the world has really been a hindrance to this. Because because people think, well, it's just prostitution, and it's usually the woman's fault. And when you look at the arrest records, it's always the woman who gets arrested. And we never really take a look at what's going on behind the scenes with the pimp, with the trafficker, even in labor trafficking. And then, of course, the user or the customer or John was never getting arrested. That was really hard. So we just let these things go. And it's now to the point where we've just become desensitized to all this, and we don't take a look at the science.
Kidnapped? Are these kids being kidnapped? Are their parents putting them up for this?
There's a number of things. Trafficking can happen in many different forms and fashions, and the trafficker can look, 100 different ways. They're like a chameleon. It can be an organized operation. It can be a single operation. Parents do sell their children. Some, a lot of it for drugs, and you have finesse pimping where, children are vulnerable if they're, if there's a weakness, if the pimp sees a weakness and they have a system where other people are trying to finesse them into being friends, and then 2-3 months later, after they're boyfriends, they think they're boyfriends, turn them out. So they're forced, they're finessed, they're kidnapped. It's just, you can't really put your finger around it. But through education and advocacy, and we've, in this legislation, put in training for anyone who has a licensed profession in the state of Ohio. Is going to get education and knowing how to handle it. 85% of law enforcement have seen trafficking cases and social workers
and
in the state of Ohio, but they didn't know it.
All the dynamics that you described, you're checking off, okay, it's this person doing it, it's that person doing it, it's this person going into that. Toledo, all of the above. You can check off each of those boxes, which is scary.
One of the things that you mentioned was, you know, when we go around giving talks, people, of course, are, you know, they're quite saddened, but then they say right away, like what you said, well, what can we do?
Right.
So one of our presentations is about the red flags. What are some of the things that are obvious? And so a young girl with a lot of hotel keys, a young girl with maybe gifts that her parents couldn't afford to give her. Those are all some red flags to look at. I went to a video store not too long ago, and I noticed this one woman, and she was picking out a video, and what was real interesting is there was a gentleman with her, and it was as though her body language and her behavior, she had no say-so. She had to go to this gentleman to see if, was this video okay? Was he going to pay for it? So it dawned on me like, something's going on here. She did not act freely in that video store. So once you become aware, you start noticing things like this. Kids at a, just a regular gas station store. They're the kids who are kind of out there. They don't go to Kroger's to get their food. They go to stores like that. And when you start noticing some of those, and when you do, then people say, well, what can you do about it? Well, we have some wonderful networking, and we have some great telephone numbers that can be called. Yeah. You know, if we tap into the Polaris Project, the national hotline number, and that number is 1-888-3737-888.
And you said they split it up like that. We're going to show people at home those numbers as well. There we go, right there. But this is for ease. This is for people to remember it, to really hone in on, I need help. Here's what I call.
And at a national level, they're connected with our local offices. And so, you know, what I didn't do it at that time because I was more stunned, but what I could have done is called that number and said something. And that little tip might have connected with something else that the local people already were aware of. So you can always make a phone call number, or the FBI Innocence Lost phone number. So there are things people can do, and it's a matter of awareness and observation.
Before we go to break, I want to talk on, we've shown the PolarisProject.org website a couple of times to our viewers. What is that, essentially?
Well, that's a national nonprofit that helps education, people be aware of what this crime looks like, and advocacy. So it's education and advocacy, but also reaches out into helping nonprofits locally and around the United States, help them serve the victims.
Is Ohio ahead of the curve as far as battling this, you think, now?
Well, okay, I want to respond to the 888 hotline number. We've had over 800 phone calls and rescues in Ohio. And with this legislation and the posters that are required, not required, but that will be put up
in the last few years, in the last month?
Yes. We will be able to not only save victims, I think the victims will know we have a very strong response to helping them. It's a very victim-centered legislation, and they can come forward and they're going to get help. They're not going to get prosecuted. They're not going to get arrested. The whole way of combating human trafficking is to really have the protection, prosecution, and prevention elements involved in your comprehensive legislation. And this law, I believe, is one of the strongest in the nation because it works in concert. It will unhinge this or take the root of the root out of your community. And a lot of these people are operating in all kinds of environments, rural, suburban, urban, poor, rich, more affluent. We're going to be able to really recognize this, and if there are any suspicions, the community can get involved and make the phone calls. So we're prepared and ready. We're trained. We're going to get more training. The law enforcement and political officials and elected judges, they're all becoming aware that yes, we've probably had trafficking cases. Yeah. And we just didn't know it.
Operation Shield, which happened here in Toledo the last couple of weeks, all-encompassing enforcement by Toledo Police and a number of other entities. Right. When we looked at the chart afterwards, showing the results, drug paraphernalia, this, that, and the other, but trafficking came up, human trafficking, and I think there were over 80 cases of it.
Absolutely. It works in concert. I mean, it's actually the second largest growing criminal enterprise in the world.
Yeah.
It's $32 to $35 billion a year worldwide, and it's all cash.
I want to talk more about this topic. We've got to take a break, sister. Hold on right there. We continue this very important discussion right after this.